Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. The Statue of Liberty, one of the most recognizable symbols of freedom in the world, almost never made it to American soil. When we picture her today, towering over New York Harbor, torch held high, it's easy to assume she was always revered, always accepted, and always destined to be a national treasure. But her story is far more complex and in many ways improbable. Imagine Liberty not in calm sunlight surrounded by awestruck tourists, but battered by rain and wind on a ship crossing the Atlantic. Imagine her in pieces, scattered across crates, unassembled, unfunded, and uncertain. In fact, the statue sat in storage for years in France and faced major political and financial challenges on both sides of the ocean. She wasn't even fully welcomed when she arrived. Many Americans were skeptical, some indifferent, and others outright opposed to the idea. In the beginning, Lady Liberty was more than just a gift from France. She was a carefully crafted political statement, wrapped in layers of symbolism. While today we associate her with immigration and freedom, early on she represented entirely different ideals: republicanism, anti-slavery sentiments, and Franco-American unity. Over time, her meaning evolved, and so did the myths surrounding her. In this video, we'll uncover the real story behind the Statue of Liberty, how she was born from revolution, nearly abandoned, and transformed through war, migration, and media into the beacon of hope we know today. We'll explore the controversies, the forgotten figures, and the deeper messages hidden in her design. So before you assume you know what she stands for, stay with us. Because the Statue of Liberty wasn't just given, it was fought for. To understand how the Statue of Liberty came to be, we have to travel back to France in the 1860s and 1870s, a time of political upheaval, revolution, and dreams of democracy. The France of that era was wrestling with its identity. After years of monarchy, empire, and instability, many French intellectuals and politicians were inspired by the American model of self-governance and liberty. One of the most passionate voices in this movement was a French jurist and abolitionist named Édouard René de La Boulaye. La Boulaye admired the United States, not just for its independence from Britain, but for the ideals it claimed to uphold: freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. He believed that by celebrating American democracy, the French could subtly critique their own political system and promote Republican values at home. In 1865, shortly after the end of the American Civil War, La Boulaye proposed an idea that seemed symbolic yet revolutionary. France should gift the United States a monument to honor the centennial of American independence. That vision caught the attention of a young sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, who was fascinated by colossal monuments and obsessed with grand expressions of freedom. Bartholdi had dreamed for years of building a massive statue, a lighthouse of sorts, that would convey strength and liberty. With La Boulaye's encouragement, Bartholdi began shaping the idea of a robed woman holding a torch high into the air. She would become known as Liberty Enlightening the World. Bartholdi saw America, particularly New York, as the perfect place for this statue, not only because it was a rising power, but because it welcomed immigrants, symbolized opportunity, and still clung to the ideal of government by the people. The statue was more than a gift. It was a political statement. It represented the shared ideals of liberty and democracy between two nations that had both fought against monarchy and embraced republicanism, at least in theory. In choosing America, La Boulaye and Bartholdi weren't just being generous, they were making a strategic move. They hoped the statue would inspire reform in France, spark pride in American democracy, and strengthen bonds between two revolutionary nations. But while the idea was noble, its journey to reality would be far from easy. Financial struggles, design challenges, and political resistance would soon follow, threatening to stop the statue before it even left French soil. Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi wasn't just building a statue. He was crafting a symbol meant to transcend nations and speak to something universal: the yearning for freedom. His design for liberty was bold, enormous, and rich with meaning, drawing from ancient influences and personal ambition. Bartholdi's earliest inspiration came from the classical world. He was fascinated by ancient Roman goddesses, especially Libertas, the Roman deity of liberty and personal freedom. These robed female figures were often depicted holding a staff or a tablet, symbolizing law and governance. Bartholdi adapted that imagery, envisioning a towering woman cloaked in robes, calm, powerful, and eternal. Her presence would be not just decorative, but declarative. This was liberty personified. But Bartholdi's ideas stretched beyond Rome. Years before the Statue of Liberty, he had submitted a proposal for a massive lighthouse in the form of a peasant woman to be placed at the entrance of the Suez Canal in Egypt. That project was never realized, but it stayed in his mind. The colossal scale and architectural ambition of Egyptian monuments, especially the pyramids and the Sphinx, inspired his desire to create something grand, something that could endure both time and scrutiny. When it came to symbolism, every detail of the statue had a purpose. The torch she raises is perhaps the most obvious, a literal and figurative light, the light of enlightenment, reason, and progress. It's a beacon for ships, but also for ideas. The tablet in her left hand bears the date July 4, 1776, linking her forever to the birth of American independence. Less visible but equally powerful is the broken chain and shackle at her feet, half hidden by her robes. It's a subtle but radical message. Liberty is not just a concept, it's liberation. This wasn't meant to be a passive figure, but a triumphant one, stepping forward from oppression into a new world of possibility. This detail resonated deeply with the anti-slavery movement and the end of the American Civil War. Then there's the crown, which features 7 spikes radiating outward like rays of sunlight. These represent the 7 continents and the 7 seas, symbolizing the global reach of liberty and enlightenment. This wasn't just America's statue, it was intended to shine a light for all people, everywhere. Through every sculpted fold and engraved symbol, Bartholdi made it clear, the Statue of Liberty wasn't just a gift of metal and stone. It was a carefully crafted ideological message, one that blended the ancient world with modern revolution, casting liberty as a timeless, universal force. But even with a visionary design, turning this statue into reality would require something much harder to sculpt: money, willpower, and political cooperation. Bringing the Statue of Liberty to life wasn't just a feat of engineering, it was a financial and political roller coaster. While the statue was meant to symbolize unity between France and the United States, building it revealed just how difficult that unity could be. Both nations faced serious struggles getting the project off the ground, especially when it came to funding. In France, the statue's creation was initially met with enthusiasm from liberal intellectuals and artists, but that excitement didn't always translate into action. The French government wasn't willing to pay for it outright, and public interest began to fade. The Franco-Prussian War had left deep scars on the nation's finances and spirit. To keep the dream alive, private fundraising efforts began, through dinners, lotteries, and public events. Wealthy donors, school children, and middle-class citizens chipped in whatever they could. Slowly, the money came together, allowing Bartholdi and Gustave Eiffel, of Eiffel Tower fame, who engineered the statue's internal iron frame, to begin building the massive figure. Meanwhile, in the United States, enthusiasm was even harder to stir. The deal was that France would pay for the statue, but America would provide the pedestal, a base strong enough to hold over 200 tons of copper and iron. But economic depression, political indifference, and anti-immigrant sentiment slowed donations to a crawl. Wealthy elites in New York shrugged off the project, seeing little benefit in spending money on something so symbolic. That's when Joseph Pulitzer, the Hungarian-American newspaper magnate, stepped in. In 1885, he used his paper, the New York World, to launch a nationwide campaign targeting working-class Americans, the very people Lady Liberty was meant to welcome. He promised to print the names of every donor, no matter how small the amount. The response was overwhelming. Schoolchildren sent in pennies, factory workers mailed quarters with handwritten notes, immigrants gave what they could. In just a few months, over 120,000 people donated, raising the necessary funds for the pedestal and proving that liberty was not just a gift from one nation to another. It was a collective dream, built from the ground up. Meanwhile, in France, the statue itself was already taking shape. Constructed in pieces at a Parisian workshop, Liberty was an engineering marvel. Her copper skin, hammered by hand, was affixed to Eiffel's complex iron skeleton. Once completed, she stood tall in a Paris courtyard, towering over the buildings, like a visitor from the future. but she wouldn't stay there for long. In 1885, workers carefully disassembled the statue into 350 individual parts, packed them into over 200 crates, and shipped them across the Atlantic. When the crates arrived, in New York, the pedestal still wasn't ready. For months, the pieces sat waiting on what was then Bedloe's Island, a quiet, windswept spot in the harbor. Finally, after the pedestal was completed in 1886, teams of workers reassembled the statue in just 4 months, welding the pieces back together with astonishing precision. On October 28, 1886, the Statue of Liberty was unveiled with great fanfare, fireworks, and speeches. It had taken over 2 decades, transatlantic cooperation, and thousands of everyday donors to bring her to life. But at last, Lady Liberty rose above the harbor, torch held high, ready to greet the world. When the Statue of Liberty was finally unveiled on October 28, 1886, it was a moment of celebration, spectacle, and symbolism. Thousands gathered in New York Harbor under gray skies and pouring rain to witness the grand dedication. Ships blasted, their horns, cannons fired, and a massive parade made its way through Manhattan. President Grover Cleveland, who had previously served as governor of New York and had vetoed funding for the statue's pedestal just a few years earlier, now stood proudly before the crowd. In his speech, he proclaimed, "We will not forget that liberty has here made her home, nor shall her chosen altar be neglected." But while the day was filled with patriotic fervor, the reactions to the statue itself were deeply mixed and far from universally adoring. To many Americans, especially white, middle, and upper-class citizens, the statue was a symbol of national pride and a welcome beacon to the world. Its sheer scale and beauty were breathtaking. At over 300 feet tall, Lady Liberty towered above the harbor, a technological and artistic marvel. Newspaper headlines heralded the event as a triumph of Franco-American friendship and a symbol of hope for the future. Yet beneath the patriotic fanfare, others viewed the statue with skepticism, even resentment. For African Americans, the irony of a statue celebrating liberty while they continued to suffer under segregation, disenfranchisement, and racial violence was impossible to ignore. Prominent Black newspapers at the time criticized the hypocrisy, with one editorial remarking that the torch of liberty burns dimly for millions of Americans still shackled by inequality. Women's suffrage activists were also present that day, but not on the island. They were excluded from the official ceremony under the reasoning that it was too dangerous for women to be aboard the crowded vessels. In protest, a group of suffragists chartered their own boat, circling Liberty Island while shouting through megaphones and distributing leaflets that pointedly asked, "What is the meaning of liberty when half the nation cannot vote?" Even among immigrant communities, who would eventually embrace the statue as their own, the early connection wasn't automatic. For many arriving in the 1880s and 1890s, the statue didn't yet carry the iconic weight it would in the 20th century. It was just another monument in a new and overwhelming land. Their focus was on survival, finding work, housing, and a foothold in a society that often met them with suspicion and hostility. In its early years, the Statue of Liberty also struggled to find a secure identity. It wasn't yet the face of American freedom we know today. It had no official role in immigration, as Ellis Island wouldn't open until 1892, and it was located on a small, mostly forgotten island few visited regularly. Maintenance was a challenge, and critics questioned whether the statue had lived up to the lofty ideals it claimed to represent. Still, despite the complicated reactions, Lady Liberty stood tall, quietly waiting for her meaning to evolve, for the world to grow into the ideals she embodied. And in time, her presence would become inseparable from the American experience, a symbol of hope not just declared in speeches, but earned through struggle, protest, and the voices of those determined to make liberty real for all. Between 1590 and 20 bombs in this chapter, we witness a profound turning point in the story of the Statue of Liberty, not as an object of architecture or French-American diplomacy, but as a living symbol, reborn through poetry and mass migration. When Emma Lazarus wrote The New Colossus in 1883, the statue hadn't yet been assembled in New York Harbor. But her words would ultimately give it a new soul. Originally, the statue was envisioned as a tribute to liberty and democracy, particularly in the wake of the American and French revolutions. But Lazarus's sonnet redirected the statue's meaning, from a political symbol to a humanitarian. 1. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. These lines, inscribed on a bronze plaque and mounted inside the pedestal in 1903, transformed Lady Liberty into the mother of exiles. She wasn't just a beacon of freedom anymore, she became a welcoming figure, embracing the millions, arriving from abroad, weary and full of hope. That reinvention coincided perfectly with the era of mass immigration. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, over 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island, often arriving after long, grueling voyages. As their ships glided into the harbor, the first thing many of them saw was the statue, her torch, raised high, silhouetted against the skyline. For people escaping poverty, war, or persecution, it wasn't just a landmark, it was a promise. The power of this imagery was quickly recognized and amplified. In newspapers, photographs, postcards, and eventually in film, Lady Liberty became synonymous with the American dream. Political cartoons used her image to frame debates about immigration policy. Advertisements co-opted her for commercial gain. Hollywood leaned on her symbolism in stories of reinvention, struggle, and triumph. Over time, her likeness became one of the most recognizable icons in the world, not just as a statue, but as a cultural ideal. And importantly, the reinvention of the statue's meaning helped shape the narrative of American identity itself. The United States, a nation often divided by race, class, and region, began to define itself through the lens of immigration and inclusion, at least symbolically. The Statue of Liberty stood as proof of that aspiration, even when reality fell. Short, exactly. That 5-minute stretch between 15s and 20s Shar is where the statue stops being stone and metal and becomes something far more powerful, a narrative. Emma Lazarus's poem didn't just add poetry to a pedestal. It rewrote the statue's purpose. Before her words, Lady Liberty was about ideals, abstract ones like liberty and republicanism. After her words, she became about people, the tired, the poor, the real humans stepping off boats, clutching all they owned, hoping this strange new land might let them start again. The beauty is in that collision, lofty ideals crashing into lived experience. And when you layer in the media of the 20th century, film, reels showing immigrants seeing liberty for the first time, photographs of Ellis Island families, wartime posters using her silhouette as a call to defend democracy, you see how deeply this reinvention took hold. The statue stopped being a gift from France and started being America's own reflection. She became a litmus test. Are we truly a nation of welcome? Do we protect the vulnerable, or do we just say we do? By the time those 5 minutes end, we're no longer looking at a statue. We're looking in a mirror. Throughout the 20th century, the Statue of Liberty evolved far beyond a static monument. It became a dynamic symbol woven into the fabric of American struggle, hope, and identity. In times of crisis, it stood not just as a figure of welcome, but as a rallying point for unity, protest, and transformation. During World War I and World War II, Lady Liberty took on a powerful role as a morale booster. Her image appeared on war bonds, propaganda posters, and recruitment materials. Soldiers and civilians alike looked to her as a symbol of what they were fighting for: democracy, freedom, and the protection of the homeland. Her torch, now electrified, shone over New York Harbor like a guardian of American ideals. Immigrants, who had arrived through Ellis Island and their American-born children, were now serving in the armed forces, connecting their personal stories to the nation's grand narrative of liberty and sacrifice. But that narrative was always more complex than the posters suggested. By the Civil Rights era, the statue's symbolism was being both embraced and interrogated. Activists like Bayard Rustin, James Baldwin, and others pointed to the glaring contradiction between Lady Liberty's promises and the realities of systemic racism, segregation, and injustice. The statue became a backdrop for powerful protests, both literal and symbolic. In 1970, a group of Puerto Rican nationalists draped a Puerto Rican flag over the statue's forehead, demanding independence. In 1977, members of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War chained themselves to the statue's base. Perhaps one of the most memorable moments came in 1986, during the statue's centennial. While politicians gave celebratory speeches, critics reminded America that liberty still hadn't arrived for all its citizens. the statue had become more than a monument. It was a canvas for expression, a stage for dissent, and a mirror reflecting the nation's contradictions. After September 11, 2001, the Statue of Liberty once again became a focal point, this time for national mourning, resilience, and unity. In the wake of the attacks, as smoke still rose from Lower Manhattan, images of the statue standing firm against a backdrop of destruction became iconic. People from across the world sent messages of support, many referencing the statue as a global beacon of freedom and hope. She was closed to the public for safety, then reopened in phases, symbolizing the country's slow healing process. Post 9/11, the statue's meaning deepened further. For some, she embodied a renewed patriotism. For others, she represented the need to question the balance between liberty and security. In a time of increased surveillance, rising xenophobia, and wars abroad, many looked at the statue not only as a symbol of what America was, but what it aspired to be, and sometimes failed to become. From world wars to civil rights, from protests to remembrance, the Statue of Liberty had transformed into something far more profound than its original vision. It was no longer just a gift from France or a tribute to friendship. It had become a living, breathing symbol of America's ongoing struggle to live up to its own ideals. Today, the Statue of Liberty stands as both a historic monument and a living symbol that continues to resonate deeply in the cultural and political landscape of the United States and beyond. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, Lady Liberty's torch still shines as a beacon, albeit one with evolving interpretations of what liberty and freedom mean in a modern context. Modern interpretations of liberty and freedom. An era marked by globalization, migration, and political polarization, the Statue of Liberty's original symbolism of welcome and freedom has been both celebrated and critically examined. Immigrants arriving in the U.S. today may still look to Lady Liberty as a powerful symbol of hope, even though the path to citizenship and the experience of becoming an American has drastically changed. In the past few decades, debates over immigration policy, including DACA, border walls, and refugee crises, have raised profound questions about who America is meant to be welcoming to, and whether Lady Liberty's promise of refuge still holds. For many, the statue still represents the aspiration for justice, equal rights, and the opportunity for a better life, even if the road to those ideals is fraught with obstacles. Her message of liberty is not just about freedom from tyranny, it is also about the ongoing struggle for civil rights, social justice, and the rights of marginalized groups to shape the future of America. Artists, activists, and scholars frequently turn to her image as a tool for political and social commentary, questioning the nation's commitment to the values she represents. Preservation efforts and tourism. Despite the evolving landscape around her, the Statue of Liberty remains a critical part of the American experience, drawing millions of visitors each year. The National Park Service has been tasked with maintaining and preserving the statue, constantly working to balance the challenges of tourism with the preservation of the monument itself. Efforts to ensure that the statue remains accessible and safe for visitors have included both major restoration projects and upgrades to visitor experiences, such as the construction of the Statue of Liberty Museum on Liberty Island, which opened in 2019. Visitors to the statue today can explore the museum's interactive exhibits, which include historical artifacts, videos, and displays that delve into the statue's symbolism, construction, and historical significance. There is also a focus on the diverse ways people from around the world continue to interpret Lady Liberty's meaning. From the immersive virtual tour experiences to educational programs aimed at children, the statue continues to be an educational touchstone, connecting the past with the present. Tourism, however, does not only offer a superficial engagement with the statue, it also provides a space for personal reflection. Immigrants, particularly those who have come to the U.S. in recent years, visit the statue as a rite of passage. For many, seeing Lady Liberty up close is a deeply emotional experience, one that often represents the culmination of their own journey toward freedom, opportunity, and belonging, connection to immigrants, activists, and artists. The symbolism of the Statue of Liberty is deeply intertwined with the struggles and triumphs of immigrant communities in the U.S. Even today, she continues to be a powerful symbol for those who seek a better life. In particular, the statue has been embraced by immigrant activists who see her not only as a symbol of freedom, but also as a tool for advocating for immigrant rights. Her image is regularly used in protests, marches, and demonstrations that call for fair treatment of immigrants, protection for refugees, and equal opportunities for all. In recent years, the statue has also been adopted by artists and writers as a canvas for expression, questioning how the country's ideals of liberty and equality are actually practiced. Artists such as Kara Walker and Ai Weiwei have used Lady Liberty's image to address issues of racial injustice, political oppression, and the refugee crisis, highlighting the gap between the symbol and the reality of how people are treated in America today. Through contemporary artwork, film, and literature, the Statue of Liberty's image remains a potent symbol for reclaiming freedom and resisting injustice. Even the global context of liberty has shifted the meaning of Lady Liberty in recent decades. With worldwide movements for women's rights, climate justice, and freedom of expression, her image is invoked on a global scale, representing not just the United States, but the shared ideals of freedom and dignity for all people. Whether appearing in protests for climate change action, civil liberties, or gender equality, the statue's legacy transcends borders, becoming a universal emblem of the fight for justice. Exactly. The Statue of Liberty has evolved into a global icon, standing as a reminder that the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice are not static. They are ongoing struggles that require continual effort from every generation. Her torch doesn't just illuminate the physical landscape of New York Harbor. It symbolizes the unwavering pursuit of ideals that transcend borders, cultures, and time periods. Her legacy is a call to action for people around the world. While she stands as a marker of America's commitment to freedom, she also challenges the nation, and others to reflect on its flaws, injustices, and areas where those values fall short. Her continuing relevance in modern activism, global movements for human rights, and even art speaks to the power she still holds to inspire change and provoke critical conversations. The torch, passed from one generation to the next, not only serves as a symbol of enlightenment, but also as a reminder that the fight for liberty is a shared human endeavor, one that demands resilience, accountability, and the courage to stand up for those who may still be excluded from the promises of freedom and equality. It's incredible how a statue, built over a century ago, still holds such emotional and political significance, touching millions of people across the globe with her message of hope, determination, and unity. Reflection. Liberty was never just a statue. She's a mirror, reflecting what freedom means in every era. The Statue of Liberty continues to evolve in its symbolism, adapting to the changing tides of history, politics, and society. She reflects the hopes, dreams, and struggles of those who seek a better life and those who fight for justice. Her meaning today may differ for each person depending on their experiences, their beliefs, and the challenges they face in their world. But through it all, her presence remains a powerful reminder of the ongoing quest for freedom and equality. Ask the audience, what does freedom mean to you today? Has the symbol of liberty changed in your eyes? Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you view the Statue of Liberty and what she represents in today's world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Lady Liberty's legacy, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.